Hey, brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode of Jesus Christ and His Second Coming. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm glad you're back with me in this episode. Today's episode is going to be a little different than typical, or what I kind of assume to be typical. This is actually episode 21 for this channel. We're a few months away from hitting our 1 year anniversary, and we're already at 21 episodes. It's a lot more than I thought I'd be at, quite honestly, but I've loved every minute of it. And something that I wanted to address in this episode is in response to a recent comment that I got on a previous video. And first thing I want to say is I really appreciate when you guys comment on the videos. I love seeing the commentary. I love hearing the feedback from you, whether it's been some that have provided, about how I present, to others that have shared, their own personal experiences or testimony related to the topic of the episode, and even those who have provided criticism. I know that sounds kind of weird to say that you're grateful for criticism, but I genuinely am. And I'm grateful for those of you who have, taken the time and the effort to provide critical questions or commentary in the video. I especially appreciate the fact that when you've done so with respect. And that's one of the most important things, is that we show each other respect. With that said, in the most recent episode that I presented about a week ago now, it was titled Missouri Lands. And what was interesting was that one of the comments I got that came back was from an individual that provided a very lengthy response to this video. And this individual, Brett Pinion, took the time to provide a lot of commentary, a lot of critical commentary about the church and about the validity of the Book of Mormon. Now, I didn't necessarily pick up on any sort of like condemning tone, but there's a lot of information in here that does, one, initially kind of present that this probably or feels like a bit of a canned response, something that this individual has, preemptively put a lot of effort into researching, or they've heard this information from somewhere else and they've collected it and then they just dumped it into the comment section. Quite honestly, something of this length is something that, when I talk earlier, when I've talked previously about sending me emails, this is a perfect example of something to drop in an email and to send me all this information. But with that said, still feel free to add commentary. And this, though, is the topic that I want to address. And in this episode, I'm not necessarily going to get into or talk specifically about the exact things that Brett has asked in this. Now, with that said, I will get to it, Brett. I'm not going to ignore you. I'm not going to downplay it. In fact, I've already commented on your response in the video, and I thank you for that. And in a future episode, I will come back. In fact, I've already started researching, and putting together my thoughts in response to this to this comment. And so I will get to the specifics in a future episode. What I want this episode to focus on, though, is kind of more fundamental, just to the general premise of the core question that you're asking in the commentary, and that is for archaeological or physical or language-based facts or evidences that support the truth of the Book of Mormon. And the first thing I want to ask, Brett, you've asked me a lot of questions and you provide a lot of great answers, or a lot of great resources for me to consider and to evaluate. I want to ask a question, though. Why do you need, or why does anybody need archaeological evidences to determine that the Book of Mormon is real or true? And I want you to genuinely give that question an honest thought. If these archaeological evidences were present today, would that somehow then change your belief in the Book of Mormon? Would you then accept it as another testament of Jesus Christ as it says that it is? Would you believe it to be true? And if so, what does that then say about your faith and willingness to investigate and to search by the Spirit and to ponder these things without archaeological evidences. Now, I know a lot of critics say, part of why we can believe the Bible to be true is because of all of its archaeological evidences. Great, but guess what? A lot of those archaeological evidences only apply to the New Testament. There's not a lot of archaeological evidence about some of the Older Testament scenarios. I'll give you two examples, okay? Because I know some people are going to say, oh, no, that's not true. We still got the whole world history. Yeah, that's true. But let me give you two examples in the Bible that we don't have archaeological evidences today. Not saying they don't exist. I'm not going to make that blanket statement. But there's two situations that I came up with right off the top of my head, kind of as I was thinking about this, where, as far as I understand, now I could be wrong, and there it does exist, and I just haven't been made aware of it yet. Okay, highly possible. First and foremost is the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt, crossing the Red Sea, or having the Red Sea parted and crossing and wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. There's really not a lot of archaeological evidences that support that event actually took place. Now, with that said, I have seen something recently that shows evidence that if that did truly take place and the parting of the Red Sea truly did take place, which I do believe, okay, I believe in the Bible to be the Word of God, as long as it's translated correctly, okay, I believe it to be the Word of God, and therefore I do believe the story of Moses parting the Red Sea and that the children of Israel walked across dry land. And so I did see a video, and I'll have to go and find it for anybody that wants to see it. If you want to see it, comment below, and I'll do what I can to try and find it again to share it with you. But the point being that that video showed a likelihood of, kind of a shallower part of area of the sea where they could have crossed. Still a lot of uncertainties around it from what I remember. Okay. That's example number one, is the children of Israel exiting, wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. There's just really not a lot of archaeological evidence to support that story. But does that compromise our belief in the Bible? No, it doesn't. Okay. Example number two, Joseph of Egypt. There, again, from what I've seen and heard, and I've even watched things on sources like the History Channel that have done research into ancient Egypt, there's still no archaeological evidence as of right now that I'm aware of that supports the existence of Joseph in Egypt, especially given the fact that he was second in command. Okay, Joseph of Egypt was second in command only under the Pharaoh, and yet there's nothing in the hieroglyphs, there's nothing in the written record, except for the Bible, that talk about his existence and his role in saving Egypt during the 7 years of famine, which was a pretty big event that it would have been talked about. Okay. Now, there's reasons that I've heard as to why there's no archaeological evidence for that story or for that portion of history, because it was wiped out by the pharaohs that came behind. That may be true. That may be the reason why we don't have it today. But guess what? Doesn't make it any less true just because we don't have that archaeological evidence in today. Okay. So that's the premise of my question, Brett, is why does archaeological evidence have to exist for one to have a testimony of the Book of Mormon, to believe it is true, to believe that Joseph Smith is a real and true prophet of God? Okay. My follow-up question to you then, Brett, what difference would it make even if we had the archaeological evidence? What is kind of your standard, and this goes to more than just Brett, okay? So anybody that is a critic of the validity of the Book of Mormon, what is the standard of acceptance that would be required for there to be an acceptance of the Book of Mormon being real and being true? All right. And the reason I ask this is because, again, this is a genuine question, and I'm treating, Brett's response here as someone of genuine concern and curiosity. I'm assuming that this is a genuine question of concern or of curiosity out of just simply not knowing much about the religion, which is fair, okay? And I welcome all sorts of questions. In fact, this reminds me years ago when I lived in California, I was at lunch one day with some coworkers, and they started asking me questions about my faith and about my religion. And one of the people at the table paused and said, "Is it okay that we ask you these questions about your church?" And I said, "Actually, I love it, because one is it makes sure that I uh, have my own understanding about what it is that I claim to believe and claim to follow." Okay. So by all means, keep these types of questions coming. Depending on what they are, I may not have a complete answer to it. Okay. I am not a scholar. I am not an institute or a professor of religion. Or I have available to me what most people have available to them is I have the Bible, I have the Book of Mormon, I have access to modern day prophets and apostles, I have access to the internet, and that's the premise of my research that way. Okay, I have not spent any significant time researching and writing a book or a paper on any one of these particular topics. So I'm what I would assume are considered to be a bit of an average person, student of Christianity. So by all means, keep the questions coming. I'm not afraid of them. I don't know that I'll always be able to have the most satisfactory answer. Part of it is because I don't always know. Some of these topics are really deep and vast, and they may require quite a bit of time to study and to understand. And so, what information I pull together will will be based off of what level of research and effort I've put into it up to that point in time. And that's going to be with a lot of the facts, or a lot of the in response to a lot of the things that you called out in the comment section, because there was quite a breadth of variety to the comments about different facts or evidences. Um, the other thing I just kind of want to follow up with, you know, somebody that's asking all of these questions, making all these statements, doesn't come across as someone who's genuinely spent time, one, simply reading the Book of Mormon. Brett, if you haven't, and anybody else watching this who's not a member of the church, if you haven't read through the Book of Mormon, I invite you to do so. If you need access to a copy, please let me know. Drop in the comments below. I can get you a copy. You can get them for free online. Just go to Church of Jesus, or go to churchofjesuschrist.org. There's a library section, and you can get a digital copy. You can request a physical copy, and I can help you get access to a physical copy. But I would suggest that you spend time studying, and not just reading and looking to try and prove it wrong or anything else, but genuinely read it like you would read the Bible with this lens. Does the Book of Mormon encourage you and invite you to come unto Christ? Okay. My personal testimony is that it does. Okay. So I'm not someone who is here as a quote unquote blind follower who has never read the Book of Mormon themselves. I've read it many times over. I'm rereading it right now as we speak. I've been reading it every night before I go to bed. And I've done my own, prayer, fasting, pondering, and I've had my own spiritual moments testifying his truthfulness to me. The second question I want you to think about, anybody that's critical about the Book of Mormon or question whether or not it's real or it's legitimate, pause for a second, and I want to have you consider something. Again, a genuine consideration. This isn't meant to be something to stump or to be a gotcha moment. Okay, this is meant to encourage genuine pondering and consideration. Think about how the Book of Mormon came to be. Okay, it's about 530 pages, 531 pages in length. Okay, this book just didn't show up out of nowhere. It came from somewhere. Okay, and there's really only two options for the Book of Mormon. Either it is a complete fraud, which is, if it's true, and I can't remember who made this quote a long time ago. If it's true, it is the greatest con in the history of humanity. I can't think of a bigger con than this. And part of why I say that is because this con has now impacted and developed a following of tens of millions of individuals worldwide. Okay, since its arrival on the scene, if you will. I mean, today alone in 2023, church membership active today is 17 million members globally. Okay. So this didn't just quote unquote con or dupe or deceive a group of people in a small region, in a country, or even a country as a whole. If it is fake, if it is a con, it has conned millions of people, tens of millions of people since its existence in the 1830s to today, and with members spanning all over the globe. Okay. And ongoing. If it was truly a fake or a fraud, it would have been debunked and the church and its organization would have fallen apart long ago. Long ago. Again, the church founded in 1830. It's 2023. We're coming up on almost 200 years. There is no other con in the history of the world that has spanned almost 200 years and continues to grow in followers. Okay? So it's a genuine consideration to think about. So if it's not a con, the only other option is that it's true, that it's real. And there is no in between. Either it's real, it's true, or it's not. You can't have it be partially it is, partially it isn't. It's either all true or it's all garbage. Okay? Genuinely consider that for a minute. On top of that, consider then like I said, the origin. How did it get here? Well, the origin story, if you're unfamiliar with it, and again, if you're unfamiliar with it and you're somebody that's dropping all these claims, it's a little premature to start making all these claims that something's false or wrong when you just don't even know the history of the story. Now, I'm not saying that you don't know, Brett. I don't know you. I don't know your background. And any other critic that's watching this, okay? I don't know your origins and your understanding of the history, but let me give you a brief summary of how it started. Okay, a young man, and at the time he was a young man. He was 14 years old. A boy in upstate New York, United States of America, named Joseph Smith, wanted to know which church was true. He lived in a time and in a place where religions were constantly divided. Some of his family was going to one religion, the other part of his family was going to another religion, and it was just at conflict and at odds. And he really genuinely wanted to know. And he finally decided to take up the counsel in James chapter 2 that said, if you lack wisdom, ask of God. Why? He knows the answer. Okay, again, this is us accepting and believing the Bible to be true. We agree with that sentiment. If we don't know, we should ask God. God will help us know. All right? That's what he did. He went out into the forest, into a grove of trees out behind his house. He knelt down in genuine effort and spirit and prayed and asked God, what is this to be true? And what was amazing was that he was then visited not only by the God of this world, Jesus Christ, he was also visited by our Heavenly Father, the Father of Jesus Christ, Elohim and Jehovah, both. Okay? The only other individual we have in Scripture that was visited by both Elohim and Jehovah was Adam. All other instances were only visited by Jesus Christ or Jehovah. He was given instruction and counsel that none of the churches were true. They were close, they drew near with their words, but their hearts were far from where they needed to be. Okay? And he was counseled not to join any of them, and that he would play a pivotal role in helping restore, and that is a key word, restore lost truths to the earth. Okay? Which then leads into eventually a few years later then receiving the Book of Mormon in an ancient form, I won't call it a raw form, but just in an ancient language form. Now I want to pause real quickly because I can already hear some people are, kind of saying, well, that's absurd that a 14-year-old boy would be visited by God, not just by God, by Jesus Christ, but also by Heavenly Father, by Elohim and Jehovah. It's just an absurd story. It's just, there's no way that's true. If that's the case, then I'm sorry, you haven't read the Bible and you don't have a belief in the Bible, because how many stories are there in the Bible where quote unquote absurd things took place that just have no other explanation, right? And I'm drawing a quick blank here. The young man that served in the temple, heard his name multiple times in the middle of the night, and come to find out was God speaking to him to command him, right? Daniel, as a young man, brought up to fight and defeat Goliath, a giant. Kind of absurd, kind of an extreme. Okay, going back to my example of Moses parting the Red Sea, pretty extreme, pretty bizarre. Okay, the plagues of Egypt. Let's move forward into the New Testament. Jesus Christ walking on water, taking loaves and fishes in small quantities and multiplying them, and feeding 5,000 people, turning water into wine. There are countless stories where things happen that justify our understanding. So to sit there and say that it all is true in context of the Bible, but the second you get somebody in modern times that's had one of these moments, it's not true. I'm sorry, but that's a fallacy of thought. I just don't understand how that can happen then, but not happen now. Okay? And that's a genuine question. All right. Anybody want to, respond to that? Feel free to do so in the comments. I'd love to see and hear your thoughts in response to that. The other follow-up here then is, let's talk about the actual Book of Mormon itself. Okay, so Joseph, a few years later, was now visited again by an angel. This time it wasn't, Jesus Christ. It wasn't Jehovah and or Elohim. It was a separate individual who was a resurrected being who originally lived in the Americas and was the author of the Book of Mormon. Sorry, wasn't the author of the Book of Mormon. It was the son of the author of the Book of Mormon. It was Moroni. Okay, his father was Mormon, the same Mormon that abridged and compiled and created the Book of Mormon. Moroni guided Joseph to find this ancient record, these plates. It was a few years before Joseph was old enough, mature enough, ready enough to then receive these plates and begin the translation process. What you got to understand is that at this point in time, Joseph's in his early 20s. He's around 22, 23 years of age. He still only has about a third grade level education. His future wife, Emma, even records and reports that his ability to write, terrible. He could barely write a letter. He couldn't do it. He's then received an ancient manuscript written in a foreign language, and in the span of 90 days, 60 plus of those days were actual days of actual translation. He translated from that ancient language into the Book of Mormon. When asked in an interview, Emma, his wife, was asked, did he have any papers or any manuscripts that he used as source material to come up with this? She said, nope. If he had, I would have seen it. I would have known it, because she played an active role, especially in the beginning, in helping him transcribe the Book of Mormon. Okay. I'm going to jump over a lot of details. Okay, and we'll follow up in a future episode if that's what you guys really want to see or hear more of. Comment below, and we'll take a look at and consider diving into this in greater detail. But fast forward to the book being translated. The gold plates themselves, Joseph was allowed, finally after the translation process, initially to show it to 3 witnesses. Okay, he showed it to 3 witnesses with actually the help of the same angel Moroni. The angel Moroni appeared to those 3 witnesses, showed them, and let them touch and feel the gold plates. Those 3 men are at the front cover of the Book of Mormon as the three witnesses. They bear testimony, even until their dying breath, the legitimacy of the visit with the angel and seeing and feeling the gold plates. Now, what's interesting is that two of those three, after giving this initial testimony, all three of them at one point in time left the church because of personal disagreements with Joseph. And that's important to understand. Those are personal disagreements with Joseph, not about the validity of the Book of Mormon and the restoration of the gospel. Two of them eventually came back. The third one stayed separated and have actually started his own separate break-off group of the church that exists today. In fact, that third gentleman who stayed away for the rest of his life was made aware that two encyclopedias, the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but I'll find it if that's something you guys really want to know. Again, comment below. He had been notified that two different encyclopedias that had talked about the early days of the church quoted or stated that he and the other witnesses redacted their testimony. He wrote both of them years later, and with a profound energy said, I have never withdrawn my testimony of seeing the gold plates, being visited by the angel, and the validity and the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. And to my knowledge, neither has either of the other two witnesses. Okay, so not only do you have Joseph, who has his account, you now have three separate witnesses for a total of 4 people testifying to the legitimacy and validity of the Book of Mormon. And in most instances, especially in a modern day court of law, 4 separate independent witnesses would be enough to establish truth. And I want you to think about that for a minute. This goes back to my earlier question of what would it take, what would you consider to be truth enough to accept the legitimacy and the validity of the Book of Mormon? And I know that this doesn't address and answer all of the archaeological based questions, and we'll get to those in a future video. But I still want to just pause here and hang on this moment for a second, because this is a very valid and legitimate thing I want to bring up when arguing and saying that there's no evidences of the Book of Mormon. Well, there's 4 eyewitnesses of it. There's 4 eyewitnesses of it that through or with the assistance of an angel were presented the plates. Okay. Now, I understand for some that may not be enough. Now, what's crazy, that after those 3 witnesses were visited by an angel and allowed to see and touch and feel the plates, 8 more additional witnesses were allowed to see the plates. Now, the difference here is they were not presented the plates by an angel. Okay. Joseph just simply brought them to them. However, they were still allowed to see and touch and feel the plates and testify of their validity. 8 more witnesses, 12 people total, have now testified. Those 8 witnesses, like the 3, some eventually left the church because of personal grievances with the prophet, not because of the validity of the Book of Mormon, still maintained their testimony of the validity of the Book of Mormon and the origins of the gold plates. 12 people. Here's my other question. What did these people have to gain, especially those that left because they disagreed with Joseph? That could have been an easy thing for them to use as claiming Joseph to be false or to be a fallen prophet or whatever other beefs they may have had at the time. They could have renounced their testimony of the validity to hang Joseph out as a fraud. But none of the 11 combined witnesses ever did so. And what do they have to gain for it? Fame? Nope. Money? Definitely not. And I'm going to take this then through the rest of Joseph's life and his brother's life. His brother Hiram stood by him through his whole life, all the way to the end. His brother Hiram went to jail with him and died in Carthage because of how much he believed and supported his brother. Hiram is my 7th great-grandfather. Those 2 men went through so much turmoil. It's just unfathomable to think that they would continue to go through the persecution over a fake, over a fraud, over a scam, especially when they weren't making money out of it, especially when they weren't getting fame out of it. Now, people say, well, they built a following. Okay, I don't know that I'd quite call that fame. Okay, especially when you look at it and compare it to today's world. Just because they had a following, they didn't live a rich lifestyle. Okay, Joseph had his newborn children die, some of them, newborn children die. He was beaten many times. At one point in time, he was dragged out of his home in the middle of the night, beaten, tarred, had hot tar poured over his body, and then feathers thrown on top of him. 99.9% of people at that point in time would have thrown in the towel, especially if it was a fake. But he didn't. He spent 5 months in jail, in a freezing cold jail, in the Liberty Jail just up the street here. And I say up the street because for me, it's just up the street. I live in North Lee Summit. It's about 15-minute drive to Liberty. It's about a 20-minute drive up to Liberty to the jail. I've been and seen the jail many times. Very, very brutal conditions. Okay, spent 5 months in prison away from his family, separated from his wife and children many times over for the purpose of building up the kingdom of Zion. Eventually thrown in jail and eventually killed over it, shot and killed over it. Who would have hung their life over a scam? Nobody. Just too many times, too many tough moments, especially again, he didn't become rich off of it. He didn't, generally speaking, become quote unquote famous over it. Your only option left is that he did this because of true belief, because it really happened. And it's true. It's real. Okay. Now, I will still address the archaeological questions and the other questions related in your comment, Brett. I'll get to them, okay, in a future episode. But I've been thinking about this one since you posted it, and I wanted to start with this kind of quote unquote introductory video, if you will, to the response, because my questions warrant genuine consideration before we move into the evidences. Okay. If your belief and acceptance in the Book of Mormon relies so much on archaeology, where's thy faith? Huh? Where is thy faith? I love the questions. Keep them coming. Remember to comment below with your questions. Smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Share this with your friends, family, loved ones, others that you know of that would find this video of interest. Okay. We're continuing to try and grow the channel. We really need your support. Continue to support. And a lot of it's really easy just by simply subscribing and liking the video. Commenting, we'll consider that the extra mile. If any of you are interested in, following me on Instagram, want to send me an email, which somebody did the other day. Thank you for that email. I've sent a response to it, so make sure you check your inbox for that. But by all means, please continue to send emails. You can follow me on Instagram. I've got a blog up that has the transcripts for the first 4 episodes of this channel. You're welcome to go and check those out. And with that, I just want to say thank you. I've really enjoyed my time creating these first 21 episodes of this channel. I look forward to creating more. If there's a topic you'd like to see talked about, by all means, drop it in the comments below and we'll take a look at it. And with that, we'll talk next time.